We're back, everyone, and so are Arsenal. Apologies, we missed last week. To be honest, a lot of people have seen on the channel, I tried to post on the community page as well, that we were just going to slow down content, unless there was sort of obviously big news. There's been a little bit of it. We will discuss it, Sharoy and I. Hi, Sharoy, how are you?
All good, man. All good. What's going on?
Yeah, good. Unless there was big news, I was kind of gonna keep the channel quiet a little bit. And it wasn't just a case of life's busy on a individual level, but I actually just think the Arsenal fan base and everything around Arsenal just needed to what do they say? Just bring it down to a simmer. Just everything just needed to calm down. We're back. This podcast is coming out and is out the day before Arsenal return to Premier League action. And it really has taken until pretty much this day. We're recording on a Thursday night, but it's, really just around 36 to 48 hours before kickoff for me to actually feel excited about Arsenal coming back. But I'm coming back genuinely re-energized and ready to go for a big part of the campaign. How are you, Sharon? How are you feeling, and how's your break been?
The break was good, man. I have been thoroughly disengaged from football, and I'm not just talking Arsenal here. I usually watch a lot of football content. I haven't done any of that.
Yeah.
I haven't put any content out. The only time I watched an international match is when I was at a mate's in Scotland, and we had a little lull between lunch and going out for drinks. So we put the England match on, and we ended up having a nap anyway because we're getting old now. I've been sat here thinking about why I'm disengaged. Is it because I'm fearful of what's to come and I'm sort of trying to deliberately block it out? Is it because there's not really much for me to say anymore other than, well, Arsenal have to start winning, and if we don't, there's a sense of inevitability about the season? Or is it just because we've been so emotionally invested and there's been so much riding on those last two games in particular when you're talking about Newcastle and Chelsea? But having not got the results that we felt as though we needed, we all did need to do exactly what you said and just let things simmer down and regroup. I think in a weird way, man, there are a few parallels to be drawn between what I've been saying now and the approach that I think the players and the manager might have needed to take in the international break too. Just take a step away for a bit, regroup, come back, and look at what's to come.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been a bit disengaged. I mean, look, when the football match ends and you turn your TV off, or you've recorded your piece of content, as we're fortunate enough to be in a position to do, whatever it is you're doing in the football space, once you've turned that off, there's kind of a real world going on. So I think sometimes it is also good to just remember that and actually dedicate time and energy to that. I sometimes feel like Arsenal can just be so it could just be the protagonist in my life, and absolutely it's great that it is for me and so many, but sometimes it's good that for a period it's not. I think that Arsenal's form has undoubtedly made us almost just want to forget about it. You learn about repression when you're studying psychology, all about kind of memory and memory losses. And one of the theories is that some bad memories, your brain subconsciously chooses not to remember them. Now, look, that's also on a much more dramatic scale than, oh no, Arsenal drew a football match. I'm very aware of that. But I do think there's an element of, you just decided, well, I don't want to think about it because I don't have to. We're not kicking a ball for 2 weeks. So there's probably a little element of that. I've used quite a dramatic term to explain it.
You've literally delved into the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder when talking about Arsenal and the international.
Oh, is that what it? Oh, okay.
Quite literally what it is, yeah.
Oh, is it? I remember it. See, I didn't do well in psychology. I think I got a C. So I just, yeah, I thought it was a type of. Anyway, doesn't matter. But sometimes you just choose, you don't want to kind of remember that kind of stuff, and you're just like, oh, just that hasn't made me have something to think about it. Oh, I don't know. So anyway, I also think that football is relentless. Football is just non-stop. The players talk about playing a lot of football, and some people are critical of them, like the amount of money you're being paid, blah blah. But I sometimes think, do fans get fatigued? Because I get fatigued as a fan. I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to be doing what I do here, kind of making content, and I'm blessed that even two people want to watch it. But I do get tired. I do kind of think, and that's just me sitting down on my lazy arse and watching it. What must the players be feeling, traveling, all the training before and after, and then the intensity of football match? the schedule is quite grueling, and I think everyone's just maybe wanted a bit of a break. Lee Judges said he's loved this break. I was chatting to Jess. She knows Arsenal. I was on a stream with her. She said the same thing. She was like, it's been great. You know, I just think everyone's just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hear you, but when I compare it to the last 2 seasons, for example, I mean, not even we can use breaks longer than the international break. We can use the summer break. I was excited. I was looking at Arsenal-related news, football-related news every day. I wanted the season to resume. I had such huge expectations, and I was the same in many ways, sort of leading up to this season, right? And I felt that way throughout the start, all the way up until I would say probably after the City game at the Etihad, and then something just happened that sort of deflated me a little bit. And I don't know whether it's that, or whether it is just, you know what, it was a lengthy international break. The football has been relentless. Let's look at other areas, because I mean, yeah, it's relentless, but I think part of it, man, is that this is sort of 20 years in the making, because we haven't won a Premier League title.
Yeah.
And over the last few years, we've just been getting closer and closer and closer. And there was this absolute feeling that this should have been our year, and still could be. I'm not saying it can't, but the fact that it looks far less likely now, I think, has deflated and disengaged a lot of people. That can all change with, I'd say, 3 wins on the spin, right? People can be a lot more optimistic and a lot more engaged and feel like we have a horse in the race again. But I can't help but think that recent form has had a part to play in it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you talked about the summer break. I mean, I thought with the summer break and the kind of want for Arsenal to return, I remember feeling football fatigue then. I remember the Euros coming around, and I was just like, all right. You know, I wasn't that engaged with it. I had my Football First podcast, and I think in March I was, you know, to anyone who's listening to that, I was saying, you know, I'm making plans for the Euros. And then around mid-April / beginning of May, I just said to the listeners, yeah, it ain't happening. I had football fatigue, and yeah, part of me doesn't love international football. The Euros were quite good. I just didn't really, I don't know. It has been, you know, we've also had 3 major tournaments in 3 years. We had the World Cup with the Euros in 2021, obviously because of the 1 year delay. Then we had the World Cup 18 months later because, of course, the 22 World Cup was moved to the winter. And then 18 months on, we had the Euros again. So that's kind of been quite relentless too. And then Arsenal have been on this like thunderous journey. I mean, you know, we've been a team that have actually just been on this kind of constant up. But with every up, it's also, there's been, oh, we could get Champions League football. We weren't expecting that. Oh, but we miss out to Tottenham. Oh, we could win the title. We're not expecting that. We miss out to City. We could win the title again. We're in the Champions League, Bayern in the quarters. And it never quite happens. So even though every year has been better and better and better, it's also kind of ultimately ended in a. So I don't know. I think that, yeah, I think we've sort of touched on quite a few reasons there, but also Arsenal's performances had been going into the international break quite drab. You know, we weren't great. But I'll tell you what I would say. I have rediscovered some energy. I have, you know, I look at the 9-point gap at this stage of the season differently to I did 2 weeks ago. I get a lot of comments on Forever Arsenal on AFTV. People sort of are quite critical, you know, come on, James, call it as it is. Stop defending the club. No, I'm just an optimist. I'll always try especially when it's football, which I'm not saying is not serious, but it's not life and death. I will always try and see the positive side, and ultimately, yes, criticize what I don't like, but I'll try to see the positives. And now I'm feeling much more fire in me to think, all right, 9 points, 27 games, the chase is on. That's how City would look at it. That's how City did look at it when they were 8 points behind in February 2 years ago. So, yeah, I feel differently today. You?
I hear what you're saying. I do. But for me, one of the reasons why I wasn't even able to put content out over the last 2 weeks, it wasn't because I couldn't have put a video out. It was just because I've now stopped even dignifying this whole title race discussion with any sort of mathematical or probability related response. I'm just like, we haven't yet earned the right to be discussing whether this 9-point deficit is gettable.
By the way, I am drinking water from a Stella Artois pint glass. which is what you do when it's been a long week, but you really need the bills to be paid because it's bloody cold outside. So that's the
Please tell me you
compromise.
didn't. You didn't. Please tell me you didn't steal that from your local pub.
My cousin did when he lived here. I don't know. That's a true story. It's actually. But here we go.
Cheers. Yeah, I just
Carry on.
want my mood hasn't changed, and I honestly don't think it will, unless and until we put Forest to the sword, and then we do the same the game
So you
after
need
that.
a result.
I do.
You need something to. It's not just going to come within you.
I need
You
a
need a
result.
reason to believe.
I need a result and a performance. I mean, a lot of people are saying, "Well, come on, look, it's almost last chance for saloon for you guys, and it's Forest coming up on the weekend, and you're at home. Surely you're favourites." But if I'm looking at performances, I can't honestly sit there and say, "Bro, we're going to damage Nottingham Forest." I can't. I can't sit there and say that.
What about Arsenal's bounce back ability over the last few years? We've had bad runs
Yeah.
and pulled ourselves out of it. Yeah, I mean that's evidence that actually we should be hopeful that the team will figure this out.
Yeah, completely. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be hopeful. I'm just saying that I can't be as unequivocal as other fans might be. And when we're talking about bounce back ability, that same rationale is rationale that I used pre-Newcastle in a game that I thought was almost last chance saloon. That same rationale was rationale that I used before Chelsea when it was almost last chance saloon. The fact that it's now been sort of back-to-back games where we felt as though we really, really needed to win and capitalize on drop points around us, and we didn't. That does sort of fill you with a bit of this sense of the hammer's just there. It's about to fall. You know, you're just waiting. That can all turn because in many ways, as quickly as momentum can be zapped out of you, it's very, very quick to start building it again if Arsenal go about it the right way. And look, fingers crossed, all they're thinking about is not just getting those 3 points, but sort of re-announcing themselves in the Premier League and saying, no. You cannot write us off just yet. We're not just dark arts. We're not just pragmatism. We haven't lost all our attacking flair. We can still get goals. We do still have potent wingers. They need to answer those questions.
Well, I actually said, who was I talking to? Maybe I was live on AFTV. Maybe it was, again, Shino's Arsenal. I can't remember. I was saying that the following things, I'm going to give you a sequence of events that could happen in the next 2 months. It is not beyond the realms of possibility this happens. Far from it, right? Liverpool draw with City at Anfield and have one bad result. 5 points. We go on a run of 5 or 6 wins. Very possible. A director of football that gets the fans excited is appointed. A midfielder or somebody is signed in January. We beat Palace and get to the Carabao Cup semi-finals. We win a couple games of the Champions League and we're looking top 8 for that. All those things are incredibly possible. Like, I'd be disappointed if any one of those things doesn't happen, actually. If those happen, our season just looks infinitely different. Like, infinitely different. Like, in the space of 6, 7, 8 weeks.
Yeah. But there were points last season where I would have looked at that and genuinely believed every word that you just said. Whereas now I'm looking at it and I'm sort of drawing upon recent history to reinvigorate a level of hope. That's that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
By the way, I know I look rude looking at my phone. It's actually because I'm getting the topics up for us. But anyway, carry on.
No. I mean, I'm just at a stage now where I can't discuss the bigger picture anymore until we return to form. When any of my friends come up to me and say, "Is the title gone? Are you still in the race? Can you do it?" I just sit there and I say, "We're not in the conversation now. Come talk to me after another 10 games and we can have a serious discussion about this. But right now, we just need to sort our shit out."
Totally fair. I think we will. I think Forest is a really good opportunity for us. I think we can still do something special this season. I don't think the Premier League has to be the defining factor of a pretty special campaign. To a lot of people, this would be disappointing. But if we, I know it's asking a lot of a club that haven't won a trophy in 4 or 5 years, but if we won a Carabao Cup, FA Cup, and finished second again in the title race, like, I'm thinking, wow, fair play. Once again, you challenge. That's all I can ask for the club to do. And you picked up silverware along the way. We could finish 4th in the Premier League. And if we won the Champions League, I don't care what happened in the Premier League. I'll be dining on that Champions League all summer. I don't think everything has to be defined by the Premier League. I think what we've got now in front of us is Forest, one game at a time. You're right. We really should just be thinking about each game before, and just go one at a time. And if things go our way, results-wise, and we claw ourselves back in something, then we can explore it. I get what you mean. But I don't think that's what the players and Arteta will be thinking. I think they'll be thinking, no, the chase is on. I actually think they should think that way. I think they shouldn't just be chuffed for themselves they beat Forest. They should see it as, 1/27th of the job done. Which is, I think, how City over the years have always built momentum. They've always just kind of seen it as, right, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. Job done. Don't be too happy about it. On to the next. Forest will be difficult to beat because Nuno Espirito Santo sides in the Premier League always are. They've got real pace and quality. They've got an informed striker. They've actually just got some pretty good players. Really do. Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, these are good players. Elanga's blisteringly fast. They signed midfielders like Danilo that we've wanted over the years. They've got centre-backs we've been targeting like Murillo over the last year or so. So it'll be difficult. But I think the fact that there are no pushovers is actually quite good for Arsenal because I wouldn't want us to come back remotely complacent about this game. And I think Forest are that right balance of we should feel confident, but I don't think we will be complacent about it.
And I'm honestly so grateful that we're at the Emirates. I'm so grateful that we're at the Emirates for this game because if there's ever a way to sort of reinvigorate a fan base and reinvigorate a team and sort of have that exchange of energy, it's at home on the first Saturday after an international break at 3 p.m. So let's get it. But look, we were saying it was a relatively slow news week or news fortnight or whatever. What was your highlight of this pretty drab fortnight of news? Is there anything in particular that really stuck out?
I don't want to call it a highlight because someone is genuinely suffering for the decisions they've made, but the David Coote stuff was obviously the big story of the window, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, I've laughed about it almost because I'd rather laugh and see the funny side whilst also acknowledging that there's something serious to address here. But then the media typically always take it too far. And now it's just the guy's just being torn apart for, okay, he's done some stuff he shouldn't have done. For sure. And I've called it into question the PGMOL's professionalism more than anything. But for me, this is a PGMOL problem more than it is a David Coote problem. I think it's them we should be looking at more than, let's talk about it. I have a load of, we're going to quick fire through a load of topics. From the director of football staff to Van Persie's comments to David Coote to Guardiola's new deal to Trossard's new deal, all this stuff. But let's start on the David Coote stuff and the PGMOL, as it was kind of the first thing from the international break. In bullet points, I don't think he should keep his job because I think his integrity as a referee, even though I'm sure he could still have the feelings he has and be unbiased, the point is it's been brought into question. And you should always be perceived as a referee to be completely and utterly unbiased. And anything that can make you look not that way, quite frankly, I think compromises your position as a referee. So I don't think he should be there, but I don't think he should lose everything. I think he should have a job in refereeing in some way, and he should be involved with the PGMOL in some way. But I'm looking at them more than anything with PGMOL. I think it's another in a long list of embarrassing moments from the PGMOL, like Mike Dean saying that he didn't send his mate to the monitor because he felt sorry for him and this kind of stuff. And there's been plenty of other evidence that these guys just aren't fit for purpose at the moment. And I think that's the bigger story. Where were you? What did you make of the David Coote stuff?
I have to say, I wasn't laughing because I found the situation funny. I was just laughing because of the sort of absolutely outrageous nature of it all. And laughing was the first thing that I had to do, because when you delve into the seriousness of it and the underlying sort of problems that it could cause, it's actually quite grave, man. I was sat here thinking, if you asked me when I was younger that the sport would end up in a position where you had referees being caught on camera, not just saying the sort of stuff that he did, but then all the stuff that comes out about substance abuse afterwards, the stuff that the tabloids sort of allege about him organizing those sorts of parties at halftime during pretty important games.
Yeah.
And the fact that there were certain circles within the PGMOL and sort of his immediate surroundings that knew about this sort of stuff, and it carried on. That, taken with things like Manchester City, for example, litigating against the regulators, and the regulators then being forced to sort of litigate back. The state of the sport in the United Kingdom. This is the Premier League, man.
Yeah, I
Do you
totally
know how
agree.
many eyes are on this sport? Do you know how much money is involved in this sport? All the managers say the margins are so small. I mean, this isn't me sort of being arrogant because I'm from England. This league is the pinnacle in many ways.
I think so.
Certainly in terms of monetary value. If people want to argue about footballing quality, well, let's just talk about monetary value in that sense. There is more than enough money for this sport to be operating properly. And I just
Yeah,
think that because of the fact that football fans are so tribal, and because of the fact that we absolutely just always come back to, oh, stop talking about this off the pitch stuff, football's played on the pitch, that we do kind of brush a lot of this off the pitch stuff under the
I
carpet.
agree.
But what happened with David Coote? The timing couldn't have been worse, because you're now at a point where people are talking about the technology not being used adequately because the referees are so incompetent. You're talking week upon week. You're starting to hear murmurs from fans saying, in actual fact, this is such a serious problem that we need to unite in the same way that we did because of the Super League, because it's perceived as so grave. And then you see that sort of behavior from someone who is tasked with officiating matches that can result in us having a moment that we've been waiting for 20 years that we haven't been
Mhm.
able to get. Though that's how small the margins are. You're talking about Liverpool having narrowly missed out on titles by a handful of points year after year after year. They're quite rightly aggrieved. And
Yeah,
it's so problematic to suggest that he can feel that way about a particular manager and be taking the substances that he was taking, and it doesn't impact his decision making. If you look at any other walk of life or any other sort of institution, if that sort of behavior were permitted, let's not forget there aren't 600 referees. We're talking a handful of Premier League referees that work week in, week out, and he's one of them. If
yeah,
that were allowed to run, you'd be talking about, is there a systemic problem? Is this just one bad apple, or is this a systemic problem and he was the only one to get nabbed? You know, these are the questions that are going to be asked. And I think there's a lot of attempts at suppressing information behind the scenes because of the fact that they know the worse this gets, the worse it gets for the league.
yeah. I also think like the fact that happened during the international break, just all eyes were on it. There was just nothing to take our eyes away. You know, it wasn't like Tuchel was starting as England manager. He didn't start till January or whenever. You know, there was no Premier League football. There was no other real big stories. It was all eyes on this. And, you know, it's now been over a week. I mean, it happened quite literally about 12 days ago. So it has, you know, we've kind of known for a little while. I think but I don't want people to think I feel sorry for David Coote. He said some pretty awful things about Jurgen Klopp, and um, you know, I didn't like the use of the nationality in there at all, and I think it was incredibly irresponsible. I know, kind of once you put the whistle down and you're out in your private life, you can do what you want, but not really. You're still also representing, you know, we all are. We all, whatever we're doing in our private lives, we're still representing who we work for, and so to also discuss things that quite literally relate to your work in that kind of way was incredibly unprofessional. So I don't feel sorry for him. I think he should lose his job. But what I do think, I'm quite glad that this happened because I felt that the PGMOL were trying to, led by Howard Webb, were trying to I think just pull the wool over our eyes, like very actively. You know, we'll have a show on Sky where we'll be really honest and upfront, and we'll tell you why we're doing things, but we'll disagree with everything that every fan ever thinks, and
Yeah.
we'll justify every decision we ever make. You know, and we'll contradict ourselves to the point where nothing makes sense. But as long as it gets through that show and we're not really being challenged enough, and I've had an easy ride of it, that'll be fine. And we'll let the Sky cameras in next time, and you know, I'll do the stick to football with Gary, and then they can ask me whatever I want, but also not really, because I've got a lot of other questions I'd like to have asked, you know, and if we were privy to that kind of access. So I quite like that this kind of thing happened where there's no running, there's no hiding. You know, it's out there. This is one of your guys, one of your better guys, and there's a lot that's out there now, and you have to answer for it. And I think football fans are at the absolute end of their tether with referees. I think they're absolutely done with them, and rightly so. I think the standard in this country, which is constantly not just made a point of when we watch them in the Premier League making error after error. But when we have that nice respite in the Champions League, or we watch international tournaments and things go so much more swimmingly, I'm not saying then they don't have errors, but it's so much better. What was the great one? There was a penalty. Girona, I think, had a goal. They conceded a goal. It was disallowed, and the referee disallowed. It was Michael Oliver. Did you see it when the
No.
attacker, but the attacker's dribbling with the ball, and the defender comes to challenge him, and the attacker just kind of slightly, just kind of palms him off a little bit to kind of protect the ball. He scores, and Michael Oliver gave the decision, and you just think, of course, it was Michael. Of course, it was the English ref.
But
So
this
it's
is
about
why
time
it's so
that something
bad on
happened they can't answer.
Sorry, this is what it's reminding me of why I felt it was so bad on the international stage. This might sound a bit too elementary, but what he has done encapsulates everything that the vast majority of international football fans hate about certain sections of English football. If you're talking about bringing in someone's German nationality into it, if you're talking about the use of that level of sort of one of the crudest expletives you can use, if you're talking about taking Class A drugs, for example, these are all things that are associated with some of the worst elements of football fandom in this country. Now, I'm not suggesting that it makes up even a small majority. It absolutely doesn't. But these are the most negative connotations that people have.
Yeah.
And you're now seeing it being illustrated and exemplified through the people that are tasked with enforcing the rules of the game. Now, when you're saying that he deserves to lose his job, but perhaps he should be able to have some sort of role in refereeing, I don't know if I agree. And I say that because I will always try and use my profession as an example, right? Because of the fact that I practice the law, I am very much regulated outside of work, not just inside of work. And I can lose not just my job, but I can lose my ability to practice if I do anything that doesn't uphold the integrity of the profession, because of the fact that I'm considered to be someone that inspires public confidence in the legal system. And if I do something wrong to that extent, it doesn't inspire confidence in the legal system. He has done exactly the same thing. He has ensured that if there was any confidence, an iota confidence in the ability of referees, he has absolutely decimated it. And it's for that reason that I think he ought to walk away from the profession as a whole. And I think his presence, whether behind the scenes or not, could actually do a lot of harm.
Yeah, I mean, what I mean to say is, and I don't know the details around what this could look like. I just mean I don't want him to lose everything, like for this. There's, and I know you're not advocating for this, but I just feel like sometimes the media and people just like they just want to see people like full. They just want to, they won't stop till they're rock bottom. I don't want that for David Coote. You could argue he's been punished enough, but the reality is that, in just how ridiculed he's been online, the fact this has been everywhere, what effect it might have had on his mental health and all that. But what I will say is that ultimately he does deserve to lose his job. I just wonder whatever can possibly still be offered to him in some kind of way. Again, maybe I'm feeling too sorry for him. I don't know. I don't know. I worry about that side of things. And actually, what's been quite nice, I mean, I think Twitter's a complete cesspit, but it's actually been quite nice that I did see during that David Coote stuff, I did see quite a lot of people actually making that point of like, you lot are just trying to, it's all right, you guys are going too far with this now. So that was kind of refreshing for an app that is just awful sometimes.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Should we go on to the next topic?
Come on.
Van Persie says he doesn't know if he'll be a manager at Arsenal. Says he sort of understands the relationship. I can't remember if he was talking about management. I can't be bothered to find the exact quote. In short, he's a manager now. The question was, could he ever work at Arsenal again? And I think he's pretty self-aware that that's not looking likely ever. Why do we hate Van Persie? And maybe you don't, but as a fan base, why do we? Why do we have? Yeah, the guy, didn't he prove us wrong? Sorry, didn't he prove himself right? Like, you weren't matching my ambitions, so I went where my ambitions could be, and I won a Premier League title.
That's one of the reasons why we dislike him so much. It is quite literally because he leaves in what, 2012?
Yeah,
I think he leaves in 2012. He goes to Manchester United. I grew up, that was the rivalry. That
Yeah.
absolutely was the rivalry. He goes there, fires them to a title, and he can look
Yeah.
back now and say, "Oh, by the way, not only did I do that, but Arsenal, you haven't won a title since I left, and you hadn't won a title for years before that." You know, so
Yeah.
whether you like my rationale or not, you cannot tell me that I haven't been vindicated. And I always
Yeah.
put myself in his shoes. I may have done the same thing. I may well have done the same thing if I felt as though the powers that be above me weren't giving me absolutely everything that I needed to succeed, and I have a finite career, and there was someone who at a club with an absolutely wonderfully decorated history and arguably the greatest manager the league's ever seen, and I get brought in as the marquee player. Yeah, maybe I go. Maybe I go. That's one of the reasons. And obviously the other reason is it's Manchester
Yeah.
United, man. It is what it is, you know? It is what it is. But I don't know how you feel about this. There are certain players when they leave, they do talk about Arsenal a little bit too much. And I think when they
Emi
keep
Martinez.
when they yeah, exactly. Exactly. Martinez is one. And I think Gallas is another. There are a few. There are a few that have left and they talk a bit too much about Arsenal. And it ends up being a bit like you say that we're the ones that are obsessed as the fans, but in actual fact, you do add fuel to the fire by constantly bringing us up and constantly
Yeah.
highlighting our shortcomings too. There's more than enough to talk about in the footballing world. If you had carried yourself with a little bit more dignity and class in the public sphere, then maybe we wouldn't feel this way. I think it's a combination of factors, but bro, he isn't going to be welcome back into any coaching role at Arsenal Football Club for the foreseeable future. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, I find this fascinating. His reasons for leaving were fair. He had 1 year left on his contract. I think I might be remembering this wrong. I think he might have said he wasn't even offered a contract. I think he might. I think he might have said that like Arsenal didn't even offer me one at that point. Like I might be wrong. I want to look that up when you're next
Okay.
talking, and
Yeah.
I will quickly look that up. But anyway, um, Arsenal fans, a lot of Arsenal fans hated Fabregas. And still do. I don't. I still love the guy. A, because he was like a hero of mine growing up. B, because obviously he's on my podcast with me right now. Um, sorry, I've seen a few comments. No, I mean, look, he left to go back home. People forget we signed him at 15. He didn't move to England at the age of 5. Like we signed him at 15, I think about 14, 13, 14, 15. Pretty much came straight into the team. And he wanted to go home. And this Barcelona that he went to were the greatest club side I've ever seen, ever, and I think I'll ever see. I don't think that team will ever be beaten because I don't think there'll ever be another Messi, and I don't think there'll ever be another Xavi and Iniesta. And Guardiola is it was perfection, 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 perfection. And home can offer you the greatest of all time. Of course, you're going to go, even if you're going to kick up a fuss in training about it. And I know people didn't like that, but I got it. Then he moves to Chelsea. I don't think people hate him for going to Barca, but they didn't like that maybe he forced the move. Then he goes to Chelsea. But apparently we turned down the opportunity to sign him. At that point, I just think you've lost all right to be mad. I mean, us as a fan base could be annoyed at Wenger, whoever the decision maker was at the club. But how did we refuse to bring him back, man? Like, it's just crazy to me. So, listen, I think he went and won 2 Premier League titles at Chelsea, and I can't blame him for it. He wanted to come home. We denied him that. If Fabregas goes on to have a good managerial career, he's at Como now. If he goes on to have a good managerial career, I would happily have him as our manager. Van Persie, no. And I'll talk about more Van Persie in more detail in a bit. But I just want to know how you feel about the Fabregas stuff because it's interesting how we look at them differently.
No, I still love the guy, man. I think he carries
Yeah,
himself with so much class. I think he's so
it does.
incredibly
Yeah,
articulate about the game. He just comes across as a really, really likable guy when you see him operating as a pundit. And I think the
yeah,
similarities that we can draw between Fabregas and Van Persie. I mean, you could use various examples, right? You could use Alex Song as an example. He was another player that people really didn't want to leave at the time. And he, in fact, did come out and say they didn't offer me the duration of contract that I wanted. And he was a player that we really needed at that moment in time. There are a few of them where, in actual fact, a lot of the visceral hate and the aggression is directed towards these players from certain sections of the fan base. When, in actual fact, the reasons that they left are because of the way the club conducted itself and the way in which the club said it would not be able to conduct itself going forward. And I think that if that level of hostility and that level of frustration and that level of anger and that level of accountability and that level of loyalty to the club were directed towards those who are making the decisions and had been directed towards them and sustained for that period of time, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now. Maybe things wouldn't have been allowed to drift for so long. Maybe better decisions would have been made sooner. Who knows? And we won't know, because very often we're preoccupied with scapegoating the easy target, which is the player that decided to bugger off.
Yeah. By the way, I just looked it up, and an AI overview on Google, which is Source and Goal and TalkSport, have confirmed that Van Persie did say that Arsenal hadn't offered him a new contract. Now, look, you never know. Conversations were going on, so you could be deep into conversation without anything being offered, but so you could be spinning that in a certain way. But interestingly enough, that's the case. I think there's a lot of conversation when Ashley Cole was inducted into the Hall of Fame. A lot of people were saying, look, make no mistake, it's what he did at Arsenal as well as Chelsea. Because quite easy, especially for me, a younger fan, to kind of basically just think that it's at Chelsea where he did it all, but he was an invincible. There's a big debate about whether he's an Arsenal legend. For me, he's not, because he left to go to Chelsea. But some people say, yeah, he's an invincible. He's the best left back in the Premier League ever. And he played for us. Of course, he's a legend. So I struggle with that. Like Fabregas, for me, I don't think he's a legend, because ultimately, while I still love him, I don't think he's a legend because he did go win 2 titles at Chelsea. So I find that difficult. But what I'd say about Ashley Cole is, he won 2 Premier League titles at Arsenal, only 1 at Chelsea. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't. I mean, if you'd asked me for this Hall of Fame, off the top of my head, I'd go, 3. Obviously, because they've won, 5 or 6, I think, in the Premier League era. I thought you must have won most of them, but no, only 1, which I find extraordinary. But I don't know. How do we get onto this? Why do we? I think if you profess to love the club, you just said that you probably would have done the same thing Van Persie did. Maybe. I mean, it's hard to know in that situation. If I just imagine myself right now, a massive, massive, massive Arsenal fan, I'm honestly not just saying this to garner any favour. I don't know if I don't know if I would. I mean, legendary status at the club you love. I'm not saying Van Persie did, or Fabregas. Cole, I think, has said he did, but I don't know. I think Fabregas said he. But legendary status at the club you love over like 1 Premier League title, I don't know.
That's all based on
think
the
I'd stay.
assumption. That's all based on the assumption that these guys are Arsenal fans that are in love with the club.
Exactly. Which is why if they come out and say it, I then when they come out and say it, I'm like, well, I understand your decision less. Then if you just went, look, I really enjoyed my time at Arsenal, still got a deep fondness for them. I wish the fans would forgive me, but I made a professional decision. I'd go, good on you, well done. But I don't think it's that. I love Arsenal's everything to me. Oh, what, a bit more money there? Off I go. It's not just a bit more money, but you get my point. I know there's a life. I know there's a career. I know there's achievements. I know there's a personal will to do things. I know all that. And I'm sure maybe I'd feel different if I was actually in that position. But I don't know. That's where I find it difficult to understand personally.
I know. And the difference with Fabregas is Fabregas didn't leave just to win. Fabregas left because, as you said, he's going home, right? The other two, I think people are looking at their motivation. I think one you could look at and maybe point towards money and the prospect of success. And the other you look at and you're looking at probably solely the prospect of success, because I'm quite confident that if it came down to it, I know he says that we didn't offer him a contract. This is Van Persie I'm talking about. But if it came down to it, I'm pretty sure that we would have matched whatever Manchester United would have offered, given how potent that guy was as a striker and how integral he would have been. I genuinely think he just moved because he wanted to win.
Yeah, I think so too. And just to round off on the whole Van Persie thing, I mean, him understanding the relationship he has with Arsenal fans, I think he just has to hold that. So I think any player that leaves a club because they want to go on to better, they have every right to do that, and that's fine. But we also have every right to hate them.
100%.
And it's how that manifests itself. If I walk past Sami Nasri in the street, I'm not going to chant at him. Obviously, like if I'm offered the opportunity to interview him, I would happily sit down. I'd want to ask him some questions. I'd be very polite and I'd shake his hand, and it'd be a very normal human interaction. If I'm in the stadium and I see that he's watching the game I don't know, from a box or whatever, I think as fans we have every right to go,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
chant within reason, because that's the game as well. So it's just about how it manifests itself. I think they just got to. I'm glad Van Persie knows that he's absolutely not welcome at the Emirates Stadium. Well, however justifiable his reason was for leaving, okay, but we hate you.
They can't. Look, they can't have their cake and eat it, man. Like if I'm in
Yeah.
if I'm in a relationship with a woman who's like 8 out of 10 in terms of compatibility and everything, right? But then I find someone who's a 10 out of 10 in terms of compatibility, and I look at the 8 out of 10 and I say, "Look, you're great, but I'm only going to live once, and here's a 10-10." I can't expect her to want to be my friend. I have to completely understand that she's going to be like, "Fine, but don't message me again, mate." Like I can't suddenly think she's being unreasonable. I would have to do what you said. I'd have to hold that. That's just
I
normal.
always knew, I always knew you were a romantic.
It's just normal. It is what it is. That's fair enough.
Don't ask me why this. I don't know why it's popped into my head. Have you seen the overlap clip, stick to football clip, about Marlon Harewood?
When Righty goes, it's such a powerful image, bro. And Gary spits his water out. I didn't know where to look. I did not know where to look. And I'm just sat there
It,
like, Jill just wants to move on. She's like, how has this just happened? It's too much.
Jill's brilliant though. I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
she's. I mean, Roy Keane. What I like about the show is you see a really different side to Roy,
Yeah.
and I've been so disappointed with his punditry on Sky, but on that show, I really like him. Um, I mean, if so, for anyone watching this who hasn't seen the clip, Stick to Football is a show on Gary Neville's channel, The Overlap, and I've retweeted it on my X account. Go have a little look. It's just genius. The way Roy Keane delivers that. What about the game?
I love his dynamic. I love his dynamic with Righty as well. Those two together are probably my favorites on there. Because it is quite literally like slightly annoying younger brother and the slightly hardened elder brother. Just
Yeah.
they're brilliant. The two of them are brilliant together.
Go on, let's go on to. I think this is the thing we're going to chat the least about because I said it again on Shino's Arsenal. I was talking about forever Arsenal. Listen, I don't know enough about this director of football stuff, and I'm a broken record. So, in a few lines, I don't really know what Edu's job was. I kind of understand it was to do with recruitment. I think it's important we get the right guy. Is the right guy here to press Arteta, or is he here to serve Arteta? I think that is two different things. Luis Ocampos has been mentioned. Clearly done some very good work with Lille and with Monaco, but that was a long time ago. The game's changed. How well has he done at PSG? I'm not so sure. I don't love the look of their squad or their recent signings. You've then got Thomas Rosický's done well at Sparta Prague. They've been very competitive. I think maybe even became the best team in their league when he went and took on a role there. And then there's others like the Sociedad guy might be leaving. So whatever, all this stuff going on. This could honestly be the shortest conversation we have. Do you have an opinion on this? Because I'm being really honest to everyone. A video will come out on the Goonerverse when we absolutely know the candidates, and I will research into it, and we're back into the full flow of things. At the moment, I can't pretend I know more than what I've just listed in the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I can't pretend I know more than that either. But I can say that there are a couple of things that I do feel quite strongly about in this situation when it comes to the appointment, regardless of who it is. This notion that someone should only be there to serve Arteta, because Arteta is absolutely the conductor, and
Yeah,
whatever he says ought to be put on a plate. Now, I think that's horribly wrong, and I think
I
that
agree.
in any walk of life, you need checks and balances, particularly with those at the top, to ensure that it isn't sort of overarching sort of tyrannical control and that the best decisions are being made. And I'm not even suggesting that the final decision needs to be something that Arteta didn't actually suggest, but I am saying that you only know it's right by getting questioned and being forced to justify it and being forced to think about it a bit more. And that's what keeps people on their toes. So I do want that. And the second thing, I think that only really will come with now a sort of experienced person in the role, someone who's well versed at doing it. Because one of the things with Arteta and Edu, and in fact a lot of these players, is it was all seen as this sort of conglomerate new project, all quite young, all coming up together, all sort of learning on the job in many ways, but with a lot of natural talent and quite
Yeah,
impressive. But now I think we're at a stage where, in actual fact, Arteta isn't brand new, isn't as fresh faced as he used to be. The players that we have aren't as young as they used to be. They're not as fresh faced as they used to be. I don't think it's time to be throwing another novice into the mix. I don't think it's time to be making a sentimental appointment with an ex-player. I think it's time for someone with a proven track record of success to come in and say, well, I've seen what you've been doing from the outside, young men. Very well done. This is where you've been screwing up.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm here to fix. External appointments, a lot of people look at Eddie's departure as or departure in general as, oh no, how are we going to replace him with someone like him? That's not the way that you need to look at it. It's how are we going to replace him and improve upon the functionality of that role. And I think that comes with an experienced hire.
I totally agree. And what I don't want is viewers of I agree with every word you've just said there. I don't want viewers and listeners of this podcast to take my blasé kind of approach as a total lack of appreciation for the importance of this role. You ask anyone, Man City, what they've done with those players of Pep Guardiola, but the people behind the scenes, okay, 115 people want to throw that. Okay, I get it, but they had proper football operators behind the scenes. How that all came about, cool. We'll find that out in the coming months, I suppose. All right, let's use a better example. Jurgen Klopp, Michael Edwards. Everyone always talks about that guy saying, actually Klopp wanted a couple other players. No, here's Salah and Mane. Even the very best have like real help around them. Fergie always had a great number 2. Arsene Wenger had David Dean. This appointment is crucial. If we are to continue to grow, I've always said that this process shouldn't live and die with Arteta. But that extends itself to everyone. Arteta's just like the most extreme example you can use. Basically, if the club's to operate properly, like Liverpool are now, beyond Jurgen Klopp, and they've had a lot of change behind the scenes over the years, and a lot of personnel change in the dressing room, whatever, but they're still competitive for the Premier League because as a club they've operated so brilliantly, and a lot of that is because of the unsung heroes whose names we probably don't even know. So I think this kind of appointment is really, 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 really important. I agree that this person has to come in and push Arteta, push Mikel. I fear, without knowing the dynamic, without knowing anything of what happens behind the scenes, I fear that Mikel probably gets what he wants more often than not. And that maybe there's Edu, and there's Richard Garlick, and there's the board, and there's everyone else. But ultimately, if Mikel kind of is really passionate about a particular signing, that the club will do their best to try and make that happen. But I think it'd be good to have someone just to go, no, you need this. And it's not everything you want. Let's take this to we're talking about Arsenal. Let's take it. We're zooming in the Goonerverse to this little, okay. And now in this world, we're talking about James and Max. Now, this is my channel officially. I always describe it as our channel when Max and I do work because he's brilliant and we work on it together. And Max will tell you, Max is probably watching this podcast, Max will tell you that we disagree on stuff. Like he'll push back and go, I don't think that's a good idea. And sometimes I'll go, okay, I hear you. And then I'll leave it and we'll move on. Or I'll go, no, I want to try it anyway. And maybe I'm right. Or actually, we've tried things on this channel that have just fallen apart. And I've been like, okay, Max, should listen to you. That was a shit idea. And he goes, yeah, but that's okay. And you need someone to just push back and go, don't do it that way. Because I see it from the production perspective, as he does too. But he's a consumer of this content as well. So he gives me the consumer angle. And, you need these different... Anyway, look, running the Goonerverse is nothing like running Arsenal Football Club. But I just think you always need people, when whatever you do in life, you need people that push back and ask questions of what you're doing. Even if your track record's spot on, you just need that.
And it's actually a really good example, particularly when you're talking about, there is this notion that up until now it may well have been whatever Mikel wants, Mikel tends to get if he puts his foot down. I can't help but think about that bit that came out about one of the reasons that Eddie was frustrated was because Madrid moved for Calafiori, and it was only then that he sort of coughed up the money or whatever. I think that in terms of getting the Kroenkes to part with funds and getting them to perceive the requests of Arteta and whoever the new sporting director or director of football or whatever is, I think the credibility of those requests would be heightened if this was a person that wasn't just an Arteta yes man and was known within the hierarchy to not be an Arteta yes man, because the Cronkies will then know that if this new appointment and Mikel are coming to them and asking for a shit ton of money for this player, there has been proper discourse and people have been properly challenged. And there has been exactly the process that you just spoke about, you and Max undergoing. They will say, well, okay, fine, this isn't just what Mikel wants, because I know that this guy will have tested Mikel. And
Do you
that's
think
what
Edu was a yes man?
I don't know if he was a yes man, but I do think I can only look at what I was looking at in All or Nothing, bro. And there were certain things that I don't think initially he wanted to terminate Oba's contract, for example. I just gauging by his body language, he looked at that like a bit of a
You're
ball
right.
ache.
You're right.
He,
I
he
remember
looked
that he didn't want to. Yeah.
he looked at that like a bit of a ball ache, and he said, "Look, there are a few options." I mean, it seemed like his preference was to reintegrate the player. But to me, it was quite obvious that Mikel wasn't going to do that. And they brushed over it a little bit in the documentary. But to me, it seemed
You're
quite
so
clear that,
right.
and ultimately what Arteta wanted, he got. I'm not saying that Mikel was wrong, but I am saying that he did get what he wanted, and I'm not sure to what extent he could
There
be
was
trusted in that environment.
there was a scene, wasn't there? I think with Vinay, maybe Richard Garlick,
Yeah,
and I apologise if I've got any of this wrong, but if I'm remembering it correctly, they were saying, well, we've got to kind of figure out a way to get him back into the team. And one of them just went, Mikel won't have it.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Now, what if you? I'm not suggesting that Arteta's approach was wrong there, but I am saying that if you had someone with a bit of clout, a bit of experience, a bit of weight, someone with respect in the sphere that comes in and tries to freshen things up and has a completely new insight on things, I think that when you're going upstairs leads to a lot more credence being placed upon the decision that you as a team have eventually reached, and it
Yeah.
might lead to the Cronkies actually saying, "Okay, I know 120 million is a lot of money, but seeing as it's you guys, I know that you haven't just taken this decision lightly. So fine, let's go." Maybe that's just me being wishful, right? I don't know, but that's how I'd look at it.
All right. 10 minutes or so to go. So let's do 5 on each. Pep's contract and Trossard's contract. They're renewing Pep Guardiola. We're renewing Leandro Trossard.
Why'd you have to put it like that? That's going to
I
be the
tell you
title.
why.
That's the
I tell
title
you
of this
why.
podcast, isn't it? 2 new contracts, Trossard and Pep.
That's actually a great title. I don't know
Oh
if I'll go
God.
with that. That is a great title. I'll tell you what I'll say. I've not been impressed with Leandro Trossard this season whatsoever, but I'm going to leap to his defence here. Trossard is exactly what it says on the tin. He was bought for £27 million because we didn't get the first choice player we wanted. He can play in multiple different positions, but he's not the best in any of those positions. But when you need him, and I mean need, not choose and opt to use him over others. When you need him, he delivers. He comes in and he has big moments. He was the guy in the run-in. He's one of our coldest players, and I mean that in terms of finisher, dealing with the big occasion. He's a trier. He absolutely is. I'd never look at him and go, you're shirking responsibility or work rate. It doesn't come as naturally to him, but he certainly tries. And he probably doesn't want to be, as Turkish describes him, the Premier League's best 12th man. But you know what? There's a role in that. And at nearly 30, or I think he might even be 30, at a big club like Arsenal, I think you can probably swallow that one. And then maybe in 2-3 years, you're off somewhere else starting football and still feeling fit and playing well into your 36, 37s. But my point is, I feel like, he's picked up an injury. We don't know if he's fit for this weekend. And Arsenal fans have both bemoaned the contract and almost celebrated the injury, which I think is such an insult to a player who shown 1 month of bad form. He wasn't in bad form, when he was in the 10 for the first month. He just had a bad month. And that's going to tear him apart. Got the winner, the third goal against Liverpool to seal the points, gave us that moment. Scored at Old Trafford in our first win there in the league in front of fans since 2006 or whatever it was. And we're going to hate on this guy. I find it so strange. He's not a starter on our best team, but he will have big moments in an Arsenal shirt this season still.
Yeah, and even if you look at everyone talks about, well, there were so many big away results at the start of this year. I'm not quite sure what happened. Who changed the game when he came on against Villa with that goal? He's had so many of these moments that alter the trajectory of our season, and we do tend to forget them. I have to say that he doesn't necessarily do himself any favors when he articulates that he needs to be in the starting 11 and doesn't necessarily step up in certain games. I don't think he does himself favors when he gets sent off in a crunch game against City. I don't think he does himself favors when he takes a penalty off Havertz when he could have broken a record and he misses. Look, there are certain things that he has done that I don't think he's
Pass back against Bournemouth was, I blame
yeah.
Saliba, but it was a shit pass. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been involved in some of the slightly more problematic moments this year as well. But I think what you touched on at the beginning is really important. He wasn't brought in to be the starting man. He was brought in because we couldn't get the person that we perceived to be the starting man. It was very much accepted that he'd be occupying the left wing as a backup to Martinelli. And I think it ended up being through nothing other than circumstance that he then had to step into this starting role. And we then started judging him as a starting player. That isn't what he was brought in for. Again, people might get bored of me using my job as an example, but it's the only way I can relate things to like real life for me. If I hire a paralegal who isn't a qualified lawyer, but there are so many people off sick that I have to get them to do qualified lawyer work, I can't really be upset at them if they can't do it, even if they are exceptional paralegals, because there are just certain things that they weren't expected to do when they were brought in. And yes, they could improve, but it's perfectly foreseeable that they may not be up to the standard that someone who is more qualified for the job would be week in, week out. And that's exactly where we are with Trossard. I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely accepted by vast sections of the fan base that he is a very, very good impact player and there is room for him in this squad. I think what a lot of people have done is because he's had to start recently, they've almost conflated the two and they've thought this new contract must be such a stern show of faith because of the relative pay hike that he's going to be a sort of nailed on starter. And I don't think that's the case. If that is the case though, bro, if he is being given a sort of a bumper wage packet with a view to him being a starter for the foreseeable future, then I think there is a problem.
Has
Because
he been given a bumper wage boost? Or?
it's from what I've read, it's a considerable pay rise when compared to what he was on. Now, I can't imagine he was on a
What are
ton
we
when he
looking
came
at?
in. I think he's now
Well,
again in the six-figure mark, right? And I know that this isn't all. A lot of people will say, "Well, it's only 100 grand or whatever," but it all adds up. We gave Eddie Nketiah a lot of shit
yeah.
for being on 100 grand and not quite performing, and all of these things do add up, right? Because 100 grand here, 100 grand there, 100 grand here. Suddenly, you're looking at the wages that you
Yeah.
could be spending on the difference maker. So these things, there is a reason why certain fans are accountants. I'm not suggesting he's on 250 a week, but from what I've read, it is in the six-figure mark now, which is a very, very good contract. And that kind of money, if you are coming off the bench or if you are starting, you're going to need to start performing, bro.
I'll say it one last time. We'll talk about Pep, just one last time. Jesus has to be Saka's backup. Sterling has to be Martinelli's backup, at least till January till we do anything. And Trossard has to be Havertz's backup. Trossard is not a Havertz lookalike in any way, shape, or form, but he's played his best football in central areas as a false nine with runners around him. Not in a 4-4-2 next to Havertz, not off the left as a touchline winger, not as a left 8, not as a 10. When he's been the false 9, he's been brilliant. Jesus has been better out there. Sterling's been better out there. Play them there, Mikel, please. It's so annoying watching players constantly, thrown into areas of the pitch that they've shown they struggle in now when there's others that they've shown they could do something in. So, yeah. Pep, to end the pod. Pep to end the pod.
Where are you with this? Do you want him to stay so that we have a chance of beating him, or are you just like, I'm done with you, get lost?
If he leaves and we win the Premier League, I'm not having a shot less. I'm not skipping one party because I went to the others, but Pep wasn't there. I'm having the exact same experience and the exact same emotion. Don't get me wrong, but when we're not great, I just don't feel right. Feeling like others should be making it easier for us, if that makes sense. I think if we were like flying and doing great, like last season and maybe the season before, and then we missed out again this season because Pep hit 93 points. And again, Haaland was unbelievable. And again, they signed another player. I'd be like, just get this guy out of our league because he's just distorted what it takes to win it. Then I'd feel differently, maybe. But at the moment, we're just not good enough for me to even be like, please leave. It's like, well, they're not actually the ones you should be worrying about yet. So there's a little bit of that in me. There's also that I don't know where I get this competitive edge from because I've never seen us win a Premier League title. But I think we can beat Pep. I think we can. And considering this season isn't going so well, I also want to know that there's maybe even next season to beat him. I don't know what. I just want to beat him and Haaland, and I love this rivalry that's built, and I don't, and I'm quite excited for that. I think it's a good thing for the Premier League. So for all those reasons, I'm fine with it. But of course, if he left, I would see our chances as being better. But Liverpool and Slot will have something to say about that. So
Yeah, that's the main thing that's always been crossing my mind. When that Pep contract extension came out, there were certain sections of the Arsenal fan base that were like, "Oh, Pep's staying. We have another bite of the cherry, and we have maybe 2 more years to go and get him." And there are other sections that were like, "Oh no, this is another 2 years that we can't win." And I'm just like, you lot keep forgetting that Arne Slot has just come in and is 9 points clear of us. Why are we still only talking about Manchester City and Pep Guardiola? Like, we need to get our shit together in that respect, right? One of the more interesting elements of this, and I'm not going to open this can of worms because I know we're coming up to the end of the podcast, but one of the first things that I saw online from a lot of Twitter accounts, people were drawing inferences about the outcome of the 115/130 based upon the timing of this contract announcement and the
right.
fact
So
that
what
it
do you
was
think of this? I was going to ask you about this. What's your connection or your thoughts on the connection?
honestly bugger all. I mean, it's an employment contract. Have you ever signed an employment contract that didn't have a term saying that you could leave if you gave adequate notice? Have you ever signed an employment contract that said, well, if we breach any of our obligations to the extent that it adversely mars your reputation, you can walk? I mean, there's general catch-all clauses that will be in there. He's a guy that wants to stay. I don't think there are so many people online that are like, trust me, I've heard that they're absolutely being found guilty and they're getting relegated. And there are some people that are like, no, believe me, they've been absolutely fine. They've been totally cleared. There's loads of intel, mate. This is a behind closed doors arbitration with some of the most senior King's Counsel in the country. They're good at being tight lipped. No one knows anything. No one knows
Yeah.
anything. Believe me when I say that, right? I don't think there's much to be drawn here. I think this is a man that wants to stay. I think this is a man that knows he hasn't got too long left. And I think this is a man that probably doesn't want to manage another club after he leaves this club, will want a break and might want to go and look at internationals. So he wants to be sure that he's given absolutely everything and left it all out there, which is why he's got a 2-year contract. And we are where we are on that. That's my view.
I think it's a great view on it. And actually, when you really think about it, what's the drawback? Sign the new deal, because if City do get away with, or I say get away, or proved innocent when it comes to these charges, he'll be the guy that stuck with them through all that and will be more a hero than he's ever been at that club. They'll go, wow, when it first all came to light, you said you'd be with us in League Two and you backed us, blah, blah, blah. And he did say, if they lie to me, I would leave, but they haven't, and I'll back them, blah, blah. And if something does, if they are found guilty and they are heavily punished, you're right. There will be something in that contract. There will be guys, I was promised that, and I have to leave because I was betrayed or something. I'm with you. I feel like it's a win-win for him, really. You can frame it however it goes, a certain way. So for City and for him, I get it. For us, City are a better team with Pep Guardiola, which makes the Premier League harder.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I want to beat him. I don't know why. I don't even hate the bloke at all. But I want
And
to beat him.
I think part of it, man, I think part of it is because it would be so easy for people to just, let's say we do have this wonderful moment and we win the Premier League. We don't want there to be any sort of element of negative connotation or caveat that could be thrown at us by rival fans. And the obvious one is, oh, you couldn't do it when Pep was there. You want the perfect story. But as you said, man, it's been a very, very long time since we won a Premier League title. You're saying you haven't seen one, mate. I mean, I definitely didn't have a beard the last time we won one. I mean, if I dug up photos from back then, you would understand how long ago this was, bro. You would understand. My backpack was covering my entire. I was young.
Yeah.
We just need to get one over the line now. I don't give a shit who's managing the other clubs, because we can then say, okay, fine. But Arteta was hired as a novice manager, and it took him a little while to get up to speed. It just so happened that when he did, it was when Pep left. But he was on the right trajectory. For example, there are loads of ways that you could level back at these guys that want to put a little asterisk next to your title if you do win one.
Well, and the challenge for any great young manager is beat the best. I mean, Mourinho came into Wenger and Fergie. Wenger came into Fergie's dominance. Like, it's always been that way. Antonio Conte won it in his first season, got the reaction that Pep couldn't in his first season at City, who I believe had no, they hadn't more recently been champions. No, I got that wrong. I was going to say Ranieri, but what a story that was. But
Yeah.
it's I think someone said that like 5 or 6 managers in the Premier League history have won the title in their first season, which is more than you'd expect. So while Arteta nowhere near his first season, the point is it's still the expectation of beat the big dogs. So I don't really want an easy way out for that. I think he's capable of doing it. For all I've questioned of Mikel in the last couple of weeks about squad management, all that, I think he's capable of doing it, and I want to see him do it. All right, Sharoy, a big thank you. We're going to leave it there. We covered there, lots of different topics. Just a bit of a catch up on everything over the last few weeks. Everyone who's been listening, I hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, the Forest chat was at the beginning of the pod briefly, but that's just our thoughts on everything. We've been able to play a bit of catch up. There will be a match report on Saturday after the Forest game, and of course, you'll be back with Sharoy's voice on Monday, right?
We will be. And I mean it when I say it, man. I keep saying it. When I record these, and I realize how much I miss not recording them. We were away for what, like a week or two, and having sat here for an hour, bro. Like honestly, I love this one.
Yeah, me too.
I do this one for fun, man.
Nah, same. Honestly, me too. Guys, big thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed recording it. And let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And we will, of course, be replying to a few of you. And in no time, Arsenal are kicking a Premier League ball again. And we hope for better fortunes this time. Sharoy, big thanks. Catch you all in a bit.